Hello, this video will walk through what to do if you have a promptly reportable incident for your study. What if something unanticipated happens? There are several categories of promptly reportable events, including adverse events, unanticipated problems, and serious adverse events or death. This video will go through all of these types of promptly reportable events. Unanticipated problems are any incident, experience, or outcome that meets all of the following criteria: that it is unexpected in nature, severity, or frequency, given the research procedures and the characteristics of the individuals being studied. It is related or possibly related to participation in the research. There is a reasonable possibility that the incident, experience, or outcome may have been caused by procedures involved in the research. An unanticipated problem places subjects or others at a greater risk of physical, psychological, economic, or social harm than was previously known or recognized. Let's look at some examples of unanticipated problems. The study drug is known to cause allergic reactions in a very small percentage of people. However, the researchers are noting a significant increase in allergic reactions of participants, greater than the known risk threshold. After the administration of a study drug, a subject develops a severe rash that is not an anticipated adverse effect of the drug. An interview question triggers an emotional reaction from a subject which is unexpected and not included in the protocol or consent as a possible risk. An investigator is accidentally exposed via a needle stick to an investigational drug while preparing it for a research subject. Adverse events are any untoward or unfavorable medical occurrence in a human subject, including any abnormal physical exam, laboratory finding, symptom, or disease related to the subject's participation in the research. Adverse events can encompass both physical and psychological harms, and can occur in biomedical and social and behavioral research. Adverse events may be internal to an institution and experienced by subjects enrolled by investigators at that institution, for example, single-center clinical trials. They may be external, experienced by subjects enrolled by investigators at other institutions that are engaged in the clinical trial. Investigators will learn of these events from sponsors or the coordinating center of a multi-center clinical trial. They represent the majority of adverse events reported to the IRBs. Serious adverse events must meet one of the following criteria. The event results in death. The event requires inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization. It results in persistent or significant disability or incapacity. It is a congenital anomaly or a birth defect. It requires intervention to prevent permanent impairment or damage, or other serious and important medical events that might not fit the other outcomes, including seizures or convulsions that do not require hospitalization, the development of drug dependence or drug abuse. Not all adverse events are unanticipated problems. In fact, the vast majority of adverse events are not unanticipated problems. For example, an investigational drug has been known to give people a rash. This is documented in the IRB application and in the consent form as a potential risk. If a participant gets a rash while participating in the study, it is an adverse event, but it is not an unanticipated problem. A small proportion of adverse events are unanticipated problems. If the investigational drug has no known side effects listed, but several participants get a rash while participating in the trial, this was unknown and it was unanticipated. Therefore, it is an adverse event that is also an unanticipated problem and must be reported to the IRB. Unanticipated problems include other incidents and outcomes that are not adverse events. Example 1, an investigator stores study information on a laptop without encryption. The laptop is stolen from their car. This is an unanticipated problem that must be reported because it was unexpected, it was related to participation in the research, and it placed subjects at greater risk of harm due to the breach of confidentiality. Example number 2. A subject enrolled in a drug trial receives a dose of an experimental agent that is 10 times higher than the dose dictated by the IRB protocol. While there was a risk of toxic manifestations, the participant did not experience any harm or adverse effect. This is an unanticipated problem that must be reported because it is unexpected, it is related to participation in the research, and it placed the subject at greater risk of physical harm. It can be challenging to decide whether an adverse event is also an unanticipated problem. This flowchart will give you some guidance in determining whether the adverse event is also unanticipated. Imagine in a study an adverse event occurs in one or more subjects. The researchers need to ask themselves if the adverse event is unexpected in its nature, severity, or frequency. If the adverse event is related or possibly related to participation in the research. And does the adverse event suggest that the research places subjects or others at a greater risk of physical or psychological harm than was previously known or recognized? Note, if the adverse event is serious, the answer is always yes. If you answer no to these 3 points and questions, the adverse event is not an unanticipated problem and need not be reported. If you answer yes, then report the adverse event as an unanticipated problem to the IRB. Another way to think about it is that adverse events are just like house guests. They're only a problem when they are serious, unanticipated, and related. Something to keep in mind is that an adverse event that is an unanticipated problem must meet all of the following 3 criteria: that it is unexpected, that it is related or possibly related to participation in the research, and it suggests that the research places subjects or others at a greater risk of harm than was otherwise known or recognized. When considering an event that happened in your research study, here's some reporting guidance. A are adverse events that are not unanticipated problems. B are adverse events that are unanticipated problems. And C are unanticipated problems that are not adverse events. Do not report A, adverse events that are not unanticipated problems. But do report B and C, adverse events that are unanticipated problems and unanticipated problems that are not adverse events. So is this event unanticipated? If an adverse event occurs in one or more subjects participating in a research protocol and the nature, severity, or frequency is not consistent with already known or foreseeable risks associated with the procedures, if it's not documented in the IRB-approved research protocol, applicable investigator brochure, and current IRB-approved consent document, if it's not included in product labeling and package inserts, or associated with the expected natural progression of an underlying disease, disorder, or condition of the subjects experiencing the adverse event, or associated with a subject's predisposing risk factor profile for the event, then it is likely an unanticipated event and should be reported to the IRB. If the research team identifies that an adverse event that is an unanticipated problem or an unanticipated problem that is not an adverse event has occurred within their study, what should they do? It's important to report to the IRB and/or FDA as soon as possible, but no later than 7 business days of the event, using the Promptly Reportable Information tab in PRISM. The investigator can immediately initiate a change to the protocol to eliminate any additional hazards to subjects. Please note that when you're in the PRISM system, your very first step will be to submit the Promptly Reportable Information tab. When that is approved by the IRB office, submit your change update form to the IRB office as a second step. When that has been approved by the IRB office, then implement the changes. If you must make an immediate change to the study protocol to protect the safety and well-being of the participants, please do make that change, but report that to the IRB as soon as possible. What are some procedures to minimize adverse events? Researchers should make sure that risks to subjects are minimized through sound research design. That exposure to unnecessary risks is limited by using procedures already being performed on the subject for diagnostic or treatment purposes. That risks are reasonable in relation to anticipated benefits, and that there are potential benefits for the subject and/or benefits for society included in the research objectives. That data is monitored to ensure the safety of subjects. That researchers follow through with continuing review by the Human Research Protections Office. Please note that research studies could be suspended or terminated by the IRB office. Let's discuss a few examples. A participant experiences liver failure due to diffuse hepatic necrosis occurring in a subject without any underlying liver disease, and liver disease was not listed in any of the protocol-related documents as a potential adverse event. Therefore, this is an unanticipated adverse event and must be submitted to the IRB. In this example, several participants experienced prolonged severe neutropenia and opportunistic infections after administered an experimental chemotherapy regimen as part of an oncology clinical trial. Protocol documents described prolonged severe neutropenia and opportunistic infections as common risks for all subjects. Therefore, this was not an unanticipated adverse event and does not need to be reported to the IRB, although it should be monitored by the research team. In our final example, subjects with essential hypertension are enrolled in a phase 2 non-randomized clinical trial testing a new investigational antihypertensive drug. At the time of the clinical trial, there is no documented evidence of gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, associated with the investigational drug, and the IRB-approved protocol and informed consent documents do not describe GERD as a risk of the research. 3 of the first 10 subjects are noted by the investigator to have severe GERD symptoms that began within 1 week of starting the investigational drug and resolved a few days after the drug was discontinued. The investigator determines that the GERD symptoms were most likely caused by the investigational drug. Therefore, the research team should report this to the IRB office because this is an example of an unanticipated adverse event. Thank you for your time, and this concludes the education session on promptly reportable events for research studies and when to report to the IRB office. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions or concerns, or if you would like to ask any questions about your research study.